Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's story, an entitled Karen attacks a disabled veteran's son at a cinema, and you will find out why you should never mess with the family of a veteran. The title story starts like this. I come from a military family. My dad was in the Navy and my grandfather was in the Army. Many of my cousins ended up going into branches of the military as well. It was no surprise to anyone when I announced that I wanted to fight for our country as well, and I was heavily encouraged to do so. I served for 16 years before returning home to live with my husband and our son permanently, and I don't regret a single thing about it. I now work with a non-profit program that tries to keep veterans off the streets, which is a difficult undertaking but incredibly rewarding. I am one of the lucky few who has a home and family and little to no lasting issues from being in the army, so I feel like I have a duty to help those less fortunate than me. My son Tony was born with a genetic condition that caused him to lose his sight completely by the time he turned 4, and it was definitely difficult to navigate. My husband had to deal with most of it since I was on active duty at the time and could only support him from a distance. He just turned 10 this year and he's never really known a different life, so he copes remarkably well. He uses a white cane when he goes out and he maneuvers through the world with ease, which is pretty impressive to watch. He ended up getting a guide dog named Athena about a year ago, and it was completely covered by insurance. Amazingly, that was a real game changer when it came to getting him out of the house and helping him to feel comfortable when it came to navigating the world. There are a lot of people who either have an issue with service animals or seem to think it's okay to touch an animal without getting express permission, and my son does not always recognize when someone is close to Athena until it is too late. I've seen more than one person get hit by his cane because they stopped to pet her, and it feels like instant karma every single time. Tony does not let rude individuals get to him, since he knows there are always gonna be idiots in the universe and all you can do is be better than them. Tony and I love to go see movies together. It's something we started doing years back, and now we try to go to one every 2 months just to have an excuse to spend time together. He loves action films and comedies like many boys his age, and I often take notes during the film of important visual information so that we can discuss it later. It's usually things like what the main character looks like or if there was any important info shown but not mentioned through dialogue, since it's hard to get the best accessibility in a public theater compared to watching a movie at home. A week ago, we decided to go see a new movie that had been released earlier in the month. We prefer to see them a little after they are released so the theater is less crowded, and we hopped in the car and made our way over. We found a parking spot and began to make our way to the ticket counter when a woman stepped into our path. She knelt down to pet Athena and I stood stunned for a moment, unsure of what to do. Karen, what a cute dog you have. Me, well, thank you, but we would prefer if you didn't do that. Karen, what's their name? Me, her name is Athena. Tony ended up hitting her in the leg with his cane because he did not know that she was there and was attempting to get a read on his surroundings. Karen, careful with that thing. You shouldn't let your kid have something like that. Tony, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were right there. This cane helps me to know where any obstacles are. Karen, sure it does. You need to leave that in your car though. Me, no, he needs that to help him walk around, so he'll not be leaving it in the car. I took my son by the arm and moved forward around the woman, and she let us pass by her. I was a bit taken aback by her attitude, but Tony just shrugged and laughed it off, saying it was another good story he could tell his friends when he went back to school on Monday. We got our tickets, bought some snacks, and made our way into the theater, where we picked seats right near the middle. There were other people in the theater, but not so many that people couldn't be spaced out, so we didn't have anyone directly near us, which was nice. Athena was stretched out on the floor in front of our seats, and she prepared herself for 2 hours of rest while we enjoyed our movie. Right after the film started, I saw a woman enter and take a seat right in front of us. I thought it was odd, but didn't think too much of it. It was about 10 minutes later that Tony nudged me and whispered in my ear that someone in front of us was talking, and when I focused I noticed that the woman directly in front was making cooing noises and had her hand between the seats in an attempt to pet Athena. It was clearly the rude lady from earlier, and I felt uncomfortable with the fact that she had followed us. Tony was clearly at a loss for what to do, so I stepped in, as any parent would. Me, ma'am, would you mind leaving our dog alone? We are trying to enjoy the movie. Karen, don't mind me, just keep watching. Tony, I would like to pay attention to what's going on, but I cannot hear when you're talking. Karen, then just watch with your eyes instead. Tony just looked utterly confused and turned to me for advice. We were being shushed by other patrons of the theater, and it was truly impossible to have a good time with this woman interrupting us, so we decided to get up and leave. I could tell Athena was glad to get out of there, as she had seemed just as uncomfortable about the situation as we were. Tony was disappointed that we didn't get to stay and watch the movie, but I reassured him that we would reschedule and come back later in the week when we could fully enjoy ourselves. We were about ready to head out when we heard the door open to the theater behind us. We turned around and I saw that Karen had followed us out. She looked angry, which nearly made me laugh, since we were the ones being followed and harassed, not her. Me, we were just leaving. Let's go, Tony. Karen, and just where do you think you're going? Me, home? We cannot have a good time out with you bothering us. Karen, I think it's you guys who are bothering me. What do you expect when you bring a dog to a public place like this? Me, she's a guide dog, not just a pet. She has every right to be here with us. It's not our fault if you cannot control yourself around an animal. And well, Ripe Stars, by the way, I have to say, I also cannot control myself around Disney, my cat. Whenever I see her, I just have to pet her. Guess I also have a lack of self-control. Anyway, Karen, I bet you're not even blind and you're just using it as an excuse to be able to bring your dog around with you. At that point, I had turned Tony around and began walking away from the woman, but she grabbed my son by the arm and ripped the cane out of his hand. He stumbled and fell to his knees, and I bent down to help him up as Athena nuzzled into his leg. Before I really knew what I was doing, I began shouting at her about how wrong it was to take things from people, especially mobility aids, and that it was inappropriate for her to claim that Tony was faking a disability when it didn't even affect her. She was yelling as well and began waving his cane around until she ended up hitting me in the side of the face with it. I stood stunned for a moment and then retaliated by hitting her in the chest, which caused her to fall to the ground. I think she even passed out for a moment. Employees of the theater approached and called up the authorities. It did not take much for them to see who was in the right, since there were witnesses in the theater who had overheard part of the argument. We found out that she hadn't even bought a ticket for the same movie as us and had instead followed us in. I of course pressed charges on her because it was too crazy for me to let it go like that. I don't have any updates on her charges as of yet, but Tony and Athena are doing well and have practically forgotten all about the incident. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you still enjoy these entitled people / Karen stories, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even drop a comment, because that would help me tremendously. The next one is titled Stupid Karen Gets What She Deserves. So I work at a rather famous home supply and maintenance store. I won't say the name just in case, but to set the scene, a month or so ago, Karen and her husband came in to buy an appliance. They happened to come on a very busy day and we only had 2 people in appliances, one of whom was going on her lunch. Well, apparently Karen was not happy that a couple of men who had already been waiting were served ahead of her and pitched a tantrum. Even going so far as to go up to the girl leaving for her lunch, who was no longer in uniform, was talking to another employee and berating her for ignoring her. The girl told her multiple times that she was not on the clock, and Karen informed her it didn't matter, she would help her right then. The girl told her she could wait or take her business elsewhere and went about her business. This apparently pissed off Karen and her husband, as he proceeded to call customer service. I happened to be covering their desk, and then began yelling at me that he was a GD man, whatever that means, I'm not exactly sure, and that if we were gonna serve other men before his wife, we would effing serve him first. I laughed at him and said that's not how things work and hung up the phone. We don't take abuse at my store, I definitely refuse to, and the managers generally support us in that. The funny part of all of this? Our town has a local Facebook page where you can post reviews and events, and Karen decided to make a massive post about what happened, only she actually didn't. She's twisted it so that it seemed that she had been purposely ignored. She hadn't, she just didn't want to wait in line. Denied service, she wasn't, she had confronted and cursed out a teenage employee who was off the clock, and she and her husband had been verbally abused by every employee in the store. They had spoken to the girl and to me, and neither of us abused them, we were both abused ourselves. Of course, at first, she got sympathy from a lot of women of the same mentality. A lot of "no one wants to work anymore" comments. However, one of our cashiers happened to be told about it and then showed me. And yes, I am petty. I'll admit it beforehand, but I made a fake Facebook account. I don't do social media much beyond lurking on Reddit, and I joined the town's page. Needless to say, I first commented in explicit detail everything that actually happened, including direct quotes from the other girl. Then, to sink the F you Karen knife a little deeper, I copied my post and replied to every comment on her post, "This is not actually what happened. What happened was," insert comment here. Within moments, the entire town turned on her. Hundreds of comments calling her a liar and a horrible person. The next morning? Well, the post was gone and she's never returned to our store. Was I a bit of a Karen myself? Maybe. But when it comes to my fellow employees, I tend to fight petty fire with petty fire. And thanks to this situation and several more since then, I've become the go-to for dealing with Karens and rude customers when my coworkers cannot get a hold of a manager. No way this can end badly, right? And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would say that there's absolutely no way OP was a Karen in this situation, because there's no way you yourself can be a Karen if you stand up against a bully and fight for your rights, aka not letting Karens harass employees. I would say OP rather deserves a medal for his efforts rather than being called a Karen. Let me know what you think in the comments. The next one is titled Consequences for Karen. I used to have a Veterans Disability Pension, VDP, for a hearing defect. It's now merged with my state pension. It was small and back home was paid annually. However, I moved to the UK and this pension was still paid by my government but now administered by the UK DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, who paid it fortnightly. Some years ago, I was entitled to a disability allowance DA because of various issues. At the time, I was diagnosed with diabetes but was trying to control it with diet, so I got called into the local job center for an interview. Unfortunately, I had a Karen for an interviewer. I'm on the spectrum, but I am high functioning. This means that I don't suffer fools gladly and I can be very rules bound. Firstly, she questions why I hadn't declared the VDP as part of my earnings. Well, I had, but it was in another part of the form. Then she said that I couldn't have diabetes because I wasn't taking any medicine and I was telling porkies. She would not allow my claim. Now, the DA claim had nothing to do with my diabetes, however, she was stupid enough to put in her letter of rejection that I hadn't had diabetes because I wasn't taking any medicine for it. She also said that they would no longer pay my VDP, and I sent a copy of the letter to my High Commission, who said don't worry, they would deal with it. I then handed a copy of the letter to my doctor, who was incensed. She complained to the DWP asking about Karen's medical qualifications. So I got asked to have another interview about 1 PM on a certain day with the Karen. I said that I could not guarantee to attend on that day as I had another appointment that morning. The message back from the Karen was if I didn't attend, my claim would be refused. So, going with the flow, I said that I would try to attend, but I might be a little bit late. So I have my morning appointment, go home, change and toddle off to the job center. I get there on the dot of 1 PM only to find that the Karen had booked an interview room on the first floor instead of the ground floor. There is no lift, and to cut a long story short, it took me nearly 15 minutes to have my sorry ass up those stairs, in the end being helped by this guy in a suit who asked why I was trying to get to the first floor. I told him that I had an interview and that the Karen who was seeing me chose the room. So I get to the room and Karen says, "You're late. I'm refusing your claim unless you have a very good reason." So I said to her, "Well, my day has been interesting. You were warned that I had an appointment this morning and because of it I might be late." "Karen, I want you to tell me about this appointment and exactly what happened to make you late." Me, I turned up at the appointment this morning, took my clothes off and then had 2 nice young ladies slather my meat and 2 veg with lube. They then proceeded to do things to said meat and 2 veg. They then got me to lie down on my side facing the wall and one of them proceeded to stick her fingers up my rear. "Karen, how dare you talk such filth in front of me? Your case is closed." Suit guy, who was listening out of sight, "Excuse me, Karen, but you did ask him to tell you about this appointment and exactly what happened to make him late." Suit to me, "How did your prostate examination go?" Me, "More tests unfortunately." Suit, "And was that the reason you were late?" Me, "No, the stupid Karen was being vindictive and interviewed me on this floor instead of the ground floor. She knew my claim was because I had breathing problems and couldn't climb stairs. I think she would have claimed that as I made it to the first floor. I was lying and refused to claim." Suit, "I think you're right." Suit guy to Karen, "You will approve his DLA claim as I had to help him up the stairs and based on my observations he qualifies. And you and your manager will report to me tomorrow at 9 AM in my office to explain your actions. If you're late, you'll be terminated." Karen, with a very white face, "Yes, sir." Turns out he was an area director that the DWP had sent in to investigate the high level of complaints about that job center. It also turns out that a complaint from a high commissioner about a breaching an international agreement is a big deal for the DWP. Who knew? And yeah, Ripe Stars, it's really good to see that Karens face consequences for their actions not only in America, but internationally and even in the UK. What a sight to behold. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Let him steal this car. I had just moved back to the USA after living in Germany for several years. Taking a job in the Midwest, I had arranged to rent an apartment sight unseen so that I had a place to ship my belongings to, and figured the short lease would give me time to house shop after arriving. So I thought my ducks were all in a row. That was of course before realizing I had inadvertently moved into the crime center of my new city. I was not overly concerned because I tend to keep to myself and I am generally easy to get along with. But I would soon make a critical mistake. Having sold off my vehicle prior to moving, shipping cars is super expensive, and since I had spent a number of years driving old clunkers in constant states of repair, I decided it was a good time to invest in a nice new SUV to get this next life chapter underway. I arranged with the property management company to secure a garage for the vehicle and brought it home that evening. This is where a memorable, albeit short, exchange gets very strange. EM is the entitled mother from the apartment above mine, TT is troubled teen and child of EM because he was around 17. As I rolled into the parking area, I first pulled up near the building entrance to unload a furniture item I had picked up for the new place. TT stood wide-eyed as he observed the shiny new vehicle. He walked around it and looked inside in a way that frankly left me feeling a little uneasy. To try to break the awkwardness, I attempted to engage him in small talk. Me, how's it going? TT, sup? Then he pulled out a cell phone and walked away to make a call. I finished unloading the vehicle and proceeded to park it in the garage I had rented. As I exited the garage and closed the bay door, I noticed TT is now looking right at me and running over. TT, hey man, what's your garage code? I was both shocked by the question and confused because I was not given any code, just an opener remote. Me, excuse me? TT, your garage code, what is it? Me, I really have no idea what you're talking about. Give it! He leaned in aggressively. Me, you need to step back. At this point, EM notices that I'm getting angry and beginning to assume a defensive posture in conversation with her son, so she zips across the parking lot screaming at me. EM, hey, what do you think you're doing to my son? Me, your son is insisting I give him my garage code. EM, yeah, well, okay, so? Me, so 1, I have no code to give, and 2, I would not be giving out a code even if I did. EM, why don't you give him the code? Me, what? Did you not hear what I just said? Why would he need a code to my garage anyway? EM proceeds to look at TT with a, now what? We did not rehearse for Q&A kind of look. Then the duo returned their gazes back on me. At this point, EM leaned her forehead way in and peered through bulging eyes as if she hoped to run a competition between her pupils and her eyebrows. It was clearly time for condescension. EM, now you listen here, there ain't no reason you don't give him your code. I was dumbfounded. TT, you gonna give me the code or not? Me, no, both of you need to leave me the hell alone. I pushed past them and moved toward the building. They both followed closely, whispering things to each other and snickering, but ultimately broke off and went up the stairs as I proceeded to my door. We avoided each other the remainder of the time I lived there, or at least I avoided them. I only took note of them being there when the police were visiting their apartment, constantly arresting EM, her husband and TT on things that must not have kept them more than a day or two at a time. It seemed like they were always back at it, that is until TT was busted for stealing cars. I'm just glad to be out of that situation and that the garage did its job. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.